Did you ride your Harley to the gym?
Not today.
Oh, you have your hat on. No. When was the last time you drove? When was the last time you rode your Harley?
It was the last month sometime.
Oh, really?
No.
You still get out a decent amount?
I put the hat on because my other hat was sweaty, so.
You're sauna guy now.
I put a dry, clean hat on to do the podcast.
Yeah. Well, you're sauna guy, so, you know.
Yeah.
How many times a week are you going to the sauna?
Every day I go to the gym. So
wow.
I kind of finish the workout, try to go in there for at least 15 minutes to 30 minutes, depending on how much time I've got. So
yeah. And you say it's preparing you for job sites.
It's definitely made the job sites more tolerable. With all this rain we've had, it hasn't been so bad, but this property we have in Garland right now that we're working on, we shut everything off, right? So the AC's off, which I'm sure the guys aren't very happy, but this is part of construction. So inside that house, when you're there, it's hot.
Yeah,
definitely. It's definitely hot, even with the windows open and everything else. It's been hot. But
when we did blinds for I've mentioned David Weekley and D.R. Horton. When we did blinds, there was very rarely was there air conditioning. So you're going in and out of those houses, and it was hot. And then the job I had before that, which has that one beat, was we actually, when I was mid high school, my parents started and my mom listens, and this is going to send her into, she might have a seizure when I start talking about this, because this was not her favorite time of life. But they owned this contracting company, and we would bid on these state contracts, and some of them were highway cleanup, some of them were rest stop cleanup. And we worked over in Llano, so we would go mow and pick up trash at rest stops way out in the country. And then we had some stretches of highway that were ours. And so in Texas, they don't just use prisoners to pick up trash. They usually, they pay companies to do it. They contract it out. And so we had some of these contracts. And so I would walk, long distances. We had some country roads, and I remember my brother and I would kind of be assigned to some of the farther out country roads. Not a ton of traffic, but we did have a stretch along I-35 just north of Round Rock going up towards Belton. And we did some work on that. And I remember one day we were out there and some tornadoes were coming in. That was a crazy, hectic day trying to get out of the way of those storms. But yeah, we would walk the highway and, you don't realize how hot asphalt is and like how hot the wind is that comes off a semi truck until it goes by you at 70 miles an hour and just blows this hot fan of air right towards you.
Yeah. Convection oven.
Yeah. So that was interesting, just getting out there, picking up trash. And I think that was definitely before, AirPods and all. There was no headphones to kind of distract you and all that stuff. You're just out there. Sure. You're just walking and picking up trash. So that was an interesting time.
You mentioned that about the Harley, and it's definitely, when you cruise a Harley, when it's in the 90s and the hundreds in Texas, it just feels like you're driving into a convection oven.
Well, and you can't escape it.
Like you get the wind that's just hot air blowing on you the whole time, and you're just like, and then you got the heat from the engine coming up as well. So I kudos to the guys that ride, 365 days a year and, are hardcore about it, because I'd rather sit in the AC.
I had one patient. I will always remember this guy. He was out in Wiley. He was he worked for a biker gang. That was his job, and forever. He rode all over the country, and he did all sorts of jobs for this biker club gang. And
I was going to say the correct word is club.
Yeah. Well, he was so I don't know what the correct term. He was real stove up. I mean, he was just like stiff. Like his whole body, he just didn't move well. I mean, and he had all sorts of scar tissue, and he just his body had just been through so much. And I'm sure a lot of it was just riding those bikes for just thousands of miles. And, then you're living just a rough lifestyle and not really taking care of yourself. And, it just, he you could just talk to this guy. You knew that he had stories. He was real leathery, rough dude. He was like, he was nice
The
enough to me,
sun. Yeah.
but he's pretty quiet. He was just different. But yeah, he rode a bike all the time, rain or shine. So
Yeah.
anyway, well,
Crazy.
how's the real estate business? You've got a lot of flips going. You've closed one. You've got another one. You're making good progress on. I went over to the one that has the conversation pit. You posted a little video of that. I need to do some editing for you. I know that. So you're
that
making
thing's
progress.
It's transforming pretty quickly. So I don't know. I think when you walked it, some walls were open, ceilings were open.
Yep.
It was in. I think we were wrapping up electrical and plumbing. Repairs and changes and things like that. And just got off the phone with the sheetrock guys earlier, and they said the upstairs was ready for tile. So I think the tile guys are set to either start this week, Friday or Monday.
I always feel stupid walking into those houses with your guys.
Go.
I walk in there. Well, your guys are working so hard and they're sweating. And then here I come, this idiot in a golf shirt and white shoes and a phone on a gimbal that's just evidently got nothing else better to do at 10 in the morning to like take pictures of them working. So it's like I try to do it real kind of secret, like trying to get a video of this or that, because I just feel bad. It's like, well, I know I'm doing work and I know I earn money. But whenever I walk into this happened the other day. We were in Austin, or I was down in Austin. I went by Megan and Dustin's flip.
Talk about that. How was that?
They're doing great. Yeah, they're doing great. And they're making really good progress. And we walked through, and it's funny. I actually said, I think a good sort of service that flippers could offer each other, if you had a tight little group of friends that were flippers, is at some point, y'all kind of go get coffee and say, hey, it's blue tape day at my house. And people who kind of know what they're looking at walk through your house and help you blue tape, because there's things that you just kind of stop seeing when you've been there enough. And then someone else walks in and like, hey, I wonder why this. And actually that happened at the house. Their kitchen texture was different than everywhere else. They had come in and they had like painted
your nemesis to texture.
Talk about giving you
forever
seizures.
That will be it.
Yeah. I wake up about 3 times a week, just
Ashton.
thinking about texture, orange peel. Yeah, no, it was weird. So we couldn't tell we don't think that they had painted over old wallpaper. They had taken down some wallpaper, but maybe they didn't spray, but anyway, so they were looking at that. It looks really good. They did something interesting that we're going to have to look into, and they're going to test it out for this house. They ordered prefab, custom, but offsite prefab type thing, cabinet doors. So they kept the bases, and then they ordered these doors that are cut, and they have the holes cut, and then you bring them in, put your hardware in, and have your guy paint them. And evidently they were very, very reasonably priced. And so they're going to check it out. And then when Megan was on, she talked about this project that they're doing up in the master bathroom, where they bought 2 pre-made vanities, and then they're putting this really cool sort of glass shelf thing in between, and all of it was purchased, and it looks really cool in the middle. But what I was going to say is Dustin needed some help opening up some boxes. I hadn't really prepared for this. So I'm wearing my, polo, my white polo, and my, Fair Harbor $90 shorts and my dock shoes. And we go in there and we're going to move around a few boxes, whatever. Well, we get one of these things and it is freaking heavy. And there's a couple guys there that are getting ready to paint. And so Dustin doesn't speak a lot of Spanish. So I go over, ask him, hey, can you guys help us out a little bit? Sure. They come in there. I was struggling. And these guys, I know they were making fun of me when I left, because I could hear them in the other room. And I was like, I got the heavy end going upstairs, and the stairs were so narrow that I was, it was just me. And by the time I got up there, I thought I was going to pass out. It was just so hard, but I'm sure I looked very out of place, all, in my crisp little outfit. And then I'm just sweating like a pig. And like this guy hasn't done work in years. And here I am having to like carry this heavy thing upstairs. And so Anyway, I could hear him in the other room making fun of how I was breathing. But anyway, we got it done, and it was legitimately heavy, and but it looks really, really nice, and so I'm proud of them. They're killing it. I mean, they have a really they're actually on a similar pace as you may be. I mean, it seems like they're getting opportunities to close on stuff pretty much back to back on things. You know, that by the time they're finishing up, they've already got something in the pipeline. They had two at one point, then they went ahead and said, yeah, let's not start two at the same time. But they are doing great. And what we were talking about yesterday is, you know, Austin has been this sort of this publicly downed market, and it always makes the news of that they're really high and really low, kind of like a Seattle type, Vegas type deal. But they're making it happen in one of the down markets. And I think I told them, I was like, look, whenever it starts getting hot again, you guys are positioned to really take advantage of it. And you are getting your systems in place and your crews in place. And like, they're doing really well. And so proud of them. They definitely have figured it out, even though retail stuff has been slow. You know, Dustin's been doing work with this one investor that they do a bunch of flips too. So he's listing their houses for him, and they're just making it work. And so super proud of them. And Megan does a great job with design, and she's going to start doing a little bit more with social media and really trying to push that stuff. So anyway, and I may pick up, speaking of social media, I may pick up a little bit of work down in Round Rock. I have some friends that own a restaurant and bar down there. They wanted some help with some videos. And so if I have an excuse to go down there more often to help them out and see Megan and Dustin and Mom, that would be awesome. So nice. Cannot complain. All right, let's talk about market updates. DFW market updates. We do this every week where we come to you and we look at the MLS and see what it's telling us. And right now it's pretty predictable. Summer is heating up. There's more homes for sale. They're ticking up slightly above year over year. When you do look back at 2023, there are more units available at this point. The average days on market in Collin County, which is where we live, you're right around the 35, 40, depending on which pocket you're in, but you know, you're around 40. There's definitely some parts of Dallas that are higher than that. But like we'll talk about later, I was just looking at one search specifically, and there's a house on there that's been on there for 1,300 days. And so there's definitely some houses that sort of skew those numbers. And so you kind of have to, you can't just take it as the gospel truth. And if you see a news report that says, you know, here's these numbers, you never really know what they're searching to get that number, you know?
So and that brings up a good point. Yesterday I was looking, and I've seen this comp before. It's in the neighborhood with this Garland house. So I'm about halfway through the project. So I start kind of looking at comps to see, you know, kind of see and start planning ahead on where I'm going to price this and market it, because you get to a point where people start, you post it on social media or somebody has a conversation with you and, you know, hey, do you have anything available? Or do you have anything coming? Or, you know, what are you going to ask? Right. So being prepared and having an idea of, you know, your value is important kind of halfway through your project. So anyways, there's a comp. It's listed for like $395, and it's smaller than ours, but it's still a bigger property. And from 4 or 5 pictures only, keep in mind that's all that's on there. It looks like it could be a decent place, but it's been sitting on the market now for, you know, 4 months, and I'm like, what's going on with this thing? And so I've kind of been scratching my head on it and thought, well, maybe it's just marketing. It's only like 4 months. You know, it's been on the market about 4 months, but there's only like 4 or 5 pictures. So maybe that's why. Maybe there's something wrong here. There's no description. Excuse me. And so I was looking at it on my phone before, and I'm limited on that MLS. So anyways, I actually pulled it up yesterday on the computer. There's no description. It's very little. The broker's from California. It's some kind of like, you know,
easy listing.
Yeah, like we don't monitor these emails. So if you send an offer, send it to here.
So ridiculous.
You know, but this inbox is not monitored. You know, like all this disclosure stuff.
Yeah.
And then you look down and the BAC, the buyer's agent commission that's marketed, is literally says $1.
$1.
It says
They're already
one
playing the
dollar.
game. They're way
Yeah,
ahead. They're playing chess, man. They're way ahead of the game on this NAR. Yeah.
it says
Wow.
$1. So I'm
Look,
like,
they're
what
tricking
is
all of
going
us.
on? So I think that has a lot to do with the reason it hasn't sold.
Yep.
Is as bad as that may sound, and with people out there, it says part of the problem is people steering clients away from properties like that. But obviously, it's very bad marketing. There's no description. There's no information.
Well, they're
I
making
think
it
as far
hard.
as
They're making it hard to buy. It's not even just about that. There's so
yeah,
many of these services that I see. So this, look, we'll finish up a little bit with the market update. It's about 12
well, this has to
shows
do with it, right?
depending.
When
Yeah,
when
yeah,
you're
yeah.
seeing when you're seeing properties sit on the market for a
Yeah.
while,
There's a
there's a,
reason.
there's a reason.
Yeah. So I'll touch back on that, but let's just say about 12 shows depending. The average price on the market right now is about $440,000. But yes, to go back to this, I was telling you, so I have a client that's looking at houses, and it is a relative of yours, kind of a distant relative of yours. And so we're helping them out. And one of the things they want is a house that doesn't have a front driveway. They want a rear entry driveway. And we were talking about it, and we didn't think that there's a way to, put this into the MLS to filter that out. There may be. But the other thing you have to realize is whenever, like this goes to this too, is like when someone's putting in the info on a listing, there's a lot of that's required, but there's a lot that's optional. And so a lot of this data that you're looking at and you want to filter by like, hey, does it have this type of shingle? I only want houses with asphalt shingles. Well, that agent on the front end had to click asphalt shingle. And then it pops up. And a lot of people don't do that. And I don't do it for every little option either. So, but anyway, so there's not an easy way to do this. So we expanded their parameters, different area, different price, and 450 houses came up. Well, if you do an auto search in our MLS, you can only do 250 homes. It won't allow them to send more than 250 homes. So I manually went through 450 listings and just deleted anything that had a front driveway. It was early one morning, had some coffee. It was mindless work. Just delete, check, delete, delete. So, but when you're doing that many listings in a row, though, you realize what you're saying. How many of these just idiocracy listings there are? There's listings that are vertical. They'll have it looks like it's made for Instagram, real narrow. Then a lot of people have started putting, not a lot. There's several that put writing on the front one. It'll say pool inside, pool out back, or it's like this weird Canva type deal, which I don't think you're supposed to do. And then it's a shocking number that actually don't have. I had to click 2 or 3, 4 pictures into the folder to see the front of the house.
Oh no.
I found one house. I'll find it and send it to you. It didn't have one picture of outside the front of the house or outside the back of the house. And it looked like they had hired some art student from UNT to go in there with the camera. And every picture was this real symmetrical art picture, real close up, blended in the back. I'm like, this is nuts. And there was not a picture of the front of the house. So it's crazy. We talk about the difference in certain agents. And, the buyer's agent commission, that's going to throw a whole kink in things. And I'm sure we'll start talking about that more because it's about to hit the fan whenever they actually take it off of our MLS in the next month or so. Because Keller Williams is gearing up. I'm seeing all the emails and the trainings and all this stuff they're changing at the office. And I need to get in on some of those new contract classes. And it's about to really, I think, get confusing for people. But these limited access listing people, like, hey, we'll only charge you $1,000 flat rate to list your house. But then it's so hard to even put an offer in. Hey, you got to log into this portal and you've got to send it this way and don't do this and only include this. Like, just move on. It's just, there's other things out there, it just, I don't know.
That and you wonder, the consumer mindset, the person that's listing it or selling it, what is their real, what's going on in their head, right? For doing what they're doing. I mean, and there's been price reductions on this particular home I'm talking about. And it looked like from the furniture and the staging, it looked like it might have been like even an Airbnb. But there's no description. Like you can't tell what the story is, right, with the property. So I mean, that's what's so confusing. And as far as like showing it had all these other instructions too, on what to do and who to call, and because it wasn't like a full service agent that was listing it. So unfortunately, like I said, it's kind of like, that comp essentially should sell for more money. I think they're definitely leaving money on the table based on just how poor it's marketed.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. And
you definitely see that. Now, I will say, going back to your deal talking about, and it's been years ago, but I remember it used to be, you know, I mean, we're talking when I was doing the traditional stuff was over 15 years ago. But I remember having clients that said they wanted the, driveway in the front or the back. And
mhm.
back then there was an easier way to filter that stuff out and do it. I know that it is a question in there that when you're uploading your listing, you can put rear entry or front entry, on there. But like you said, if people aren't clicking those boxes, then it's not going to show up,
Yeah. And
and,
then if
and a
you
lot of
filter by
agents have
it,
gotten,
yeah, you're,
lazy. A lot of people don't put that stuff in there. How many times do you see that people don't put room dimensions? That's
yeah,
pretty
they're starting to
popular. That
require
people,
some of that. I noticed the
yeah.
last time I did a listing, they actually required a few of them to be put in. And
What I've started doing now with all my flips and any of the listings that I do take on, like I've got a past client that's been a client of mine for over 15 years, and we're listing his property this weekend. It's another one in Plano. Remember last year I sold those two that were in the
yeah,
same neighborhood.
yeah,
Well, now the tenant, um, the lease was up, and so now we're selling another one of his portfolio.
okay,
And I do the floor plans. I mean, to me, I'd spend the
yeah,
money, get the floor plans. I just think that's a nice thing to have um, in your listing. It drives me nuts sometimes just because I'm very particular, and they don't always label the rooms correctly. like
yep,
like the last one I had on Sunscape, like I think the laundry they labeled as pantry, and I'm like,
mm-hmm,
what are you doing?
yep,
Like it's very clear. You walk in there and it's a laundry. Why are you labeling it incorrectly?
yeah, yeah.
So
I had to
that's
correct them in
frustrating to me.
Mapleton.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's frustrating. It's like they measure it and then they go to their desk and then they're like, "Oh, what's this room?"
Well, and I think what it is that the person that's getting paid to walk the house with their app. The other
Yeah,
day we did it out in Princeton, and she's just walking around the house with this app, and then it uploads it to some person. I'm assuming is here, maybe over in the Philippines or something. That's
somebody
just
else is
interpreting
doing
the
it.
data, and it's like, oh,
Got it.
this looks like a little room, and then they say, yep, it's done. So I don't know that there's a lot of check. I doubt they send it back to the photographer and say, hey, does this look right to you? And maybe they do, and they're like,
Yeah,
but yeah, I'm sure there's a little disconnect. But luckily, most of them are pretty easy to work with to say, hey, can we, switch this out? And
yeah. But I
um,
think the floor plan's been a nice thing to do, and it gives
yeah,
the dimensions, um, and
people
it
like it.
definitely helps. Yeah, it definitely helps before you get out there, kind of see what the flow is.
Yeah,
Um, it'll help. For instance, like this one I've got coming up in Garland right now. It's a 2-story. All the rooms are up. But they're big rooms, and I think it'll help. You know, you'll see the pictures, and it kind of makes sense. But once you see the floor plan to kind of back it up, I think it helps.
yeah.
So
Oh yeah, yeah. That's something you turned me on to, and now every time I get the package, you just go ahead and click that. The other add-ons I don't do. Like they'll do the video walkthrough, they'll do the drones, and you see some listings that have that, and it's kind of cool. When they have,
yeah,
if it's a more of an expensive listing and they're at a, maybe by a lake or something like that. That's it. I think it does add a lot, but by the time you start adding all those features, that those packages do kind of start getting expensive. I'm like,
no, I
I'm good.
mean you got to think how people are looking, right? They're looking on their phones, for the majority of the time, and what's coming through their phones is their Zillow hot sheets, or if
Mm-hmm.
an agent's got them set up on a drip like you do, and they might get 10 properties, that come through on a weekend, and so they're just kind of clicking and going
Yeah,
through it real quick, and
yeah.
and then checking location. So
My other thing I was going to ask you on investment properties, I was looking for an investment property for a guy. And I remember seeing this property a while back because when I read the description, I'm like, this is the one. It was the craziest. It's leased, some of it's leased, some of it's not. And it says you can tour the property with an executed contract. I'm like, who in their right mind is going to put a contract on a $1.1 million little sixplex and not walk the property until there's an executed contract in your option period.
Well, that is in the commercial world of things, in the investment world of multifamily, that is common.
Really?
And it is because they don't want to bother the tenant. So they don't
Yeah.
they don't want to try to worry about gaining access to the tenant's units and everything else if somebody's not serious. So
yeah, I mean, I could
most of
see
that
that.
stuff, depending on what the marketing is, you'll have a lot of things that bulletproof the contract if you're doing it sight unseen. You're doing it off of numbers and projections, and then you're subject to you're subject to inspections.
Yeah, I guess if that's part of that world, I was not. I mean, to me, I'm like, you can't even go look at one of them just to see kind of what you're getting into.
In the multifamily and commercial real estate world, that's common because a lot of times, properties are not advertised, on the open market. Like, you don't want to spook your tenants.
Sure.
Especially like commercial. Like, if I sell the commercial building, I'm not putting a sign out front.
Right.
Like, it's up for sale, but it's, the tenants don't know it's up for sale. I don't want to spook the tenants or anything like, hey, landlord's changing. So
how did that ever go? Did your guy ever come back with a decent number? I know you had someone looking at it.
No, we were talking back and forth with the guy on Friday, and he said, he threw out he asked me to throw him a number. So I threw in like a stupid number. And then he came back and he said, no, that's too high. Or it's too skinny. And I was like, okay, well, throw me a number. And he hasn't yet. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. If not, no big deal.
They're just fishing.
You got to wonder, some of these people kind of fish, they say they have a buyer. They say they have a contract. I mean, I will give him the hustle because he found the property. He looked it up. He found me. He actually called Tabitha. So whatever he was using for skip tracing, it connected it back to Tabitha and called Tabitha when we were in Mexico. She told him to call me, and then we talked, and so at least we're to this point. But supposedly he's got a buyer, buys in the area, blah blah blah. But it could be that he's fishing and trying to get a seller that's willing to sell, and then bring it back.
And then he can go
clients.
market it. Yeah, he can go market
exactly.
it kind of to his pocket people and say, I've got a good one here. So
so I appreciate the hustle. I mean, it's not a bad thing to do. I mean, that's how you get business generated sometimes. So
yeah, for sure. At least he knows your name. Everyone thinks my name is Deborah Cervantes and lives at 77 Via Altos Drive in Garland or Mesquite or whatever. It's like, nope, not Deborah. Okay, so let's do a little bit of news. All right. Well, we have a few local stories. I have talked about the upside of the Sherman area, the 75 corridor going up towards Sherman. There's $1 billion semiconductor development going up there. And then up north of that, they're putting in roughly, I think, $1 billion-ish, maybe $5 billion. I don't know. The numbers get dumb. Around Lake Texoma, they're doing a Hard Rock resort. They're doing Choctaw's putting some money up in there. I think there's a Margaritaville type resort. So all that 75, that corridor. Well, they announced this week just south of Sherman, Dorchester, which I'm not familiar with, but on the map it looks like it's just a little southwest of Sherman, off of 75. They have announced a 4,000 home master plan community with another 1,400 rental units, probably apartments, and then a large mixed use, 250,000 square foot mixed use. So 4,000 home community right there just south. I mean, some big developers are starting to put really, really big money between here and Sherman. And I think I've tried to push some investors to really look up there, and it's just not quite, it's just a little far away and not quite laid out for some people yet for them to just go for it. But there's been some properties up in Sherman that's almost are the 1% rule, even just on the MLS. And so I think it's still possible to get in and try to do some cool stuff up there. So it would be interesting to try to eventually go up there. And I've done an open house up there, but just spend more time and understand the market a little bit more and maybe try to find something for us or, for an investor up there. But yeah, pretty big news. The company that's doing it, I didn't recognize the home names, but they're based out of Farmers Branch. So it's a local development company that's doing that big community up there. So, Redfin came out with a report, and this is a crazy number. Guess if you had to guess two numbers, what's the average rent in the United States right now? It's a very generic number, but what's your average rent in the United States?
Average rent would probably. I'm going to bump it up a little bit because I think there's lots of other areas where rents are higher, but there's also places where rents are lower. So I'm going to say $2,000 a month.
This one said 1650. And so I don't know if this is.
I was
going to
go
account,
18,
like New York
1850.
Yeah, I mean, is this
1850? But
yeah.
Okay.
And you have to imagine you've got a lot around here in New York and LA and all that. San Francisco, I'm sure it's crazy, but there's such a huge middle America where you're in El Dorado, Arkansas. You're not going for $2,000 for a two bedroom apartment,
right?
So, but they're saying very generic. Again, I said before, whenever they're pulling these numbers, you have to say like where are they getting the data and all that. But let's just, for sake of conversation, 1650 on the rent, and they say the average salary that you need to afford that. What would you guess? Average salary to afford the average rental right now.
Household?
Yeah. Well, I didn't know if it's household. It's just come up. Yeah, like your number, whatever. Let's say you're an individual.
And it's probably what, 80,000?
Says 66. 66, which is, seems like a lot. To say that to basically be average and get the average apartment out there, you have to make $66,000. That seems steep, fairly steep. Now, I was helping a friend, rent his house and do some comps for him, and he was wanting some info, and it looked like the people that were talking to him, I think he was wanting to do like 2,600, and it was getting some decent traffic, but a lot of the people, it was more expensive than they were wanting to do. That's for sure. So there's still a lot of people who are in that lower realm, and when they want to actually get into a house, I think it's a different level of around here. 2,600 probably for rent. I would say 2,800 is probably pretty average for a house around here if you want to get like an actual 3-2, something like that. So the other news, so we always try to do a little bit of restaurant real estate news. There's good news and bad news, Tavis. So the good news is Dunkin' Donuts is bringing in a distribution 25,000 square foot distribution center in Burleson. I would never have guessed that Dunkin' Donuts is doing so well in our area that they needed to build a 25,000 square foot distribution center, because Dunkin' Donuts is spare. And I never even think about going to Dunkin' if I want a donut. They taste very stale to me, but I think they have good coffee, and I think they do distribute their coffee to grocery stores. And so maybe that's what we're talking about. I'm not really sure, but Burleson, that's over Fort Worth way, right? That's
south. Yeah, south of Fort
Fort Worth. Yes. So I would imagine you're not a Dunkin'. The Dunkin' is a Boston thing. That's like a Northeast.
It's a New England thing.
Yeah. New England. Yeah. You spent some time up there.
What was the other? And Best Eaten Donuts and Dunkin' Donuts. So Best Eaten was more of the. I remember Best Eaten being better than the.
Really?
Dunkin' Donuts.
Yeah. You were in Rhode Island.
I don't know.
Right?
I don't know if those are still around. I think they are. Yeah, that was Rhode Island area.
Yeah.
But everything's all kind of interconnected. I mean, it's when you can fit the whole state of Rhode Island and inside of DFW. Yeah, it's kind of mind-boggling, right? I mean, you drive 2 hours there, and you're, from where I lived in Rhode Island to Boston, or 2 hours, and you're in New York City. So in any which direction, you were crossing multiple states to get somewhere. Yeah. In what sometimes takes us 2 hours to drive across the Metroplex. So.
Right. Yeah. Well, as far as I was spoiled, I grew up in Round Rock. Round Rock Donuts have actually been on the Food Network, and they're really well known. And there's always a line. I mean, around the building, they're very good donuts, and they're kind of different.
Do they do those cronuts?
No, they don't. No, I've had one of those. Donut. and
Those are pretty good.
they're good, but they want like $9 for them. I'm not paying. I don't want a gourmet donut. I want a Round Rock donut that comes in a box that, what's funny is they actually do this birthday specialty donut that they cut it with a 5-gallon bucket. They put it on the dough, cut the middle out, and then they fry that.
Oh
And
my
it's
gosh.
huge. It's just like party sized donut. But no, they use some sort of potato flour. And so these donuts actually come out sort of orange, and it's really different. But it's amazing, and there's lines out the door every Saturday, Sunday. Even weekdays, there's people there. But it's a big. So I grew up going to Round Rock Donuts. That was kind of the deal. And so up here, you either have, my favorite are honestly the single family Korean family that owns, like right on the corner from us, Jay's Donuts. The same husband, wife, and grandma, grandpa are there making them every Saturday. They work super hard, and they make great donuts. And because all the gourmet stuff, I just can't with the gummy bears and bacon and all that. Let's just charge another $6 for fried dough. I just want to, give me a glazed donut and maybe a blueberry cake, and I'll be all right. But
when Landon was younger, donuts used to be more of a normal routine. To get Landon donuts, but I think he's kind of grown out of that. Now he's more on a health kick and watching what he's eating, and
good for him.
That, so
I'll take it. The sit down donuts. There's not a lot of sit down donut places, but when we were in West Monroe, there was a sit down donut place, and early on Saturday morning donuts with Dad, me and the kids, when they were little bitty, we would go there and sit down and eat donuts. And that was a really good memory. But when you think about it, there's not a ton of sit down donut places, and so
that's true.
There's your gap in the market right there. Other restaurant news, you're going to have to find a new place to go eat lunch, it sounds like, because Hooters is closing down several locations, and supposedly 40 locations or something like that, several of which are in the DFW area.
It's not surprising.
I mean, I only know where, because I have a photographic memory and I'm basically like Waze. I know where Hooters are. So there's one up in Frisco next to our friends at the Red Lobster that is going out of business. And there's one next to the other just odd restaurant that I don't go to very often, but holds a special place in my heart. They're on Addison on Beltline next to the Magic Time Machine. And the Magic Time Machine, I want to go there. There's carpet. I think we may have talked about it, but we used to go there as kids down in Austin. There was one on Lake Austin, and it's a trip. I mean, it literally, like, whoever created that restaurant was some sort of drug induced. And I want to go to the one there in Addison, because they haven't touched it.
We were talking about taking somebody there recently. Tabitha brought it up. I haven't been there in years. We took Landon or Anthony there, I think, in 5th grade after he got some good grade on a test or something. Then
it would be a fun night. It would be fun to go there, have a good time, then go somewhere. There's a lot of great restaurants around there,
right? With like dry ice in them, and
Green Goblin type stuff, where it's a trip. Yeah, but
it's actually not surprising. I mean, the last time I went into Hooters, I think the last time I actually went into one was in Tampa with some friends of ours that live out there. And of course Hooters originated in Tampa. So
okay.
It was kind of a staple. And the husband, he's a big Hooters fan. So he was like, hey, we got to go to Hooters before you leave, And so we went, and I was like, okay, and I got the wings, because I remember I used to like the wings,
Yeah.
I mean, that was kind of like the first wing place, really.
Yeah, but then you realize it's just a basket of fried chicken. It's just like, they're not wings.
Yeah,
like,
and it
odd.
it turned my stomach. I mean, I had it, and it was, and I mean, because I used to like it because it had that batter and everything on the wings, and it was like, oh man, it was so good back in the day. But now it's like my stomach was definitely not used to it. So,
yeah.
And the quality, of the entertainment is not what it once was, but maybe that's just us getting older too. But
probably, hopefully, that appeal to the, I'm sure early on the sports bar, your young guys. We would go there in college.
That was one of the first restaurants,
Yeah, we would go there in college. I think the last time I went was when I was in California, and inevitably it'd be someone's birthday and they would want to go to Hooters or whatever. And that's it's been a long time. Yeah, just it is an odd experience, but yeah, so I'm not.
I remember being like 12 years old, and I would take my brother and, some other friends, and we would, we lived in Irving at the time. We'd take the DART bus and we'd go to the mall, the Irving Mall back in the day. And we'd take it by bus, and, I'm like 12 years old. And at the time, 12, I felt like I was like 18,
Right.
and you think back to like a 12-year-old kid now, or your 12-year-old sons, and I'm like, yeah, there's no way.
Yeah.
What are they doing?
Allie's 14. The idea of, Luke 2 years ago taking
mind
the
you, this
bus
is like
to a mall.
early 90s, so we all grew up pretty quick.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'd go, and I mean, I had like no money, or we had enough money to like, eat a basket of fries and some wings, or
Right.
something
I'm
like
sure
that.
they
Whatever
love to see you guys rolling in.
doing odd jobs. But we'd go to the mall and we'd just walk around, and I don't know if I'd buy anything. It was just a lot of window shopping back in the day, and of course that's how you met other teenagers and girls and stuff like that. And then we'd go over to Hooters, and we thought we were like
big time.
Yeah, we thought, the girls were flirting with us and all this stuff, being like 12 years old.
They probably were, man. They probably really liked you.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
anyways,
No,
that's kind of my fond memories of that back in the day. And then when
unfortunately,
and here's something you want to hear. It's kind of funny. The very first oyster I ever had was actually at Hooters, which out of all places, probably not the best choice.
That's like, the first sushi I had was at a QT in Nebraska once. It's like, oh, okay.
Probably not the best choice, but a friend of mine, turned me on to him early on. I was probably like 18, 19. I might have been a little bit older, but anyways, going to Hooters and ordered oysters on the half shell, and they were iced down. They were good, and of course I had to start with a cracker and all that. Now of course I've graduated all these years later, but
I've never had a raw oyster. That will be a
go to Hooters before they close. And
heck no. That's a no. Yeah, I guess there's enough people around our area. I don't think that we made the list. I think there's 40 nationally, and honestly, I don't know how many they have. They may have 1,200 of them, so it might just be sort of they're closing some of the underperforming stores. So there you go. Well, we always do a little bit of a deep dive into the real estate world, and a few times in our podcast, we have looked at some of the cities, the towns that have been around us. I don't think we've done Frisco. If someone comes back and says, you guys did Frisco, 10 episodes ago, I will feel bad about this. But that being said, this is episode 60, by the way. This will be episode 60. And I'm really proud of that. Like,
nice.
I've seen a few things that say, I think most podcasts don't get past the third. Only 10% of podcasts get past 3 episodes, and 1% gets past, or maybe it's insane. At this point with 60 episodes, we're easily kind of top 1%, or even probably a much smaller percentage of that actually get to 60 episodes. So really cool.
What's cool? I have to throw this at you. This weekend, I'm talking to a friend of mine from the lake, and shout out to Bentley if you're listening, which he is way behind because he started at the very beginning. Once he realized we had a podcast, actually, you met him.
Is an insurance guy?
Yeah, he's an insurance guy. I had his dog in the bar when we were watching the last Mavs game. So he hit me up last week and he goes, "Hey, I'm really wanting to transition into this full time, and I want to learn. And so, I'm going to start your podcast." And I was like, "Cool." So I don't know how many episodes he listened to last week. Well, enough to the point where he had just listened to the George Roddy interview. So he's listened to our very first.
I think that was like episode 20, maybe. I was just looking back at that. I mean, so he burned through some.
It's wild. So he's talking to me this weekend, and he's bringing all this stuff up, and I'm like, listen, and he's like, yeah. So Ashton's like just finishing this up, and like I can't wait to hear what happens with Polk. And what happens with Mapleton, and I'm like,
that's awesome.
This is weird. I'm like hearing this, and I'm like, wait, I can't spoil it. You got to keep listening because
that's cool.
We're way past all that now, right?
Yeah. And well, I'm glad he's going
like,
in order.
And Ashton's like trying to, transition, and how's he doing with that? And I'm like, well, just keep listening. And he's he's doing really
He's
good. But
doing well.
it's kind of funny to hear this, of our timeline, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
real life timeline here of like, like when you watch a TV show and it was recorded last year, but it's all
Yeah.
coming out now, and you have to kind of stay quiet to like wait and see what
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah. That's
So
cool, man. That's
it was interesting, but that was the first time anybody's kind of had that deep of a conversation with me about some past episodes, and
yeah.
like I had to think back to like where we are now compared to there.
Yeah.
So
Well, I'd like to go back and listen to it just from a sound quality, and I keep tinkering with that. I've gotten pretty consistent with it, but I'm at a place where I like most everything. But there still are some things that I toy with from time to time. But I'd like to go back. It might be kind of scary to go back and listen to some of those, but some of the podcasts I listen to now, I mean, they'll be on episode 200, and their sound still sucks. And so you don't have to have perfect sound, but I am proud of the fact that ours does sound pretty good. I do spend a decent amount of time on that every week to try to make us as professional as possible. So
yeah,
this week we're going to
all
talk a
right,
little bit about Frisco. I know we're running, a little long. We're not going to just completely dwell on it, but we try to touch on a few towns. I know we've talked about. I think we talked about Richardson. I believe we talked about Garland, and I don't know about Plano. Maybe early on, but if we've talked about Frisco, sorry, we're going to talk about it again. But Frisco from an investment standpoint, I've never flipped anything up there. I've sold a house for a couple up there. It's one of the best. Honestly, it's probably one of the. Frisco is such a well-known name. I think people nationally kind of know Frisco as sort of this up and coming great place to live. There's a lot of YouTube channels that are built around Frisco. There's a lot of social media that's built around Frisco, and they're just doing so much stuff right up there that you know it's a nice place to. It's a benchmark place. You can say, well, we're just west of Frisco, we're just south of Frisco, north of Frisco, whatever. So, but in general, I looked up on the MLS. The least expensive 3-bed, 2-bath in Frisco is $290,000. The least expensive house in general, single family house, is 285, is a 2.2. And the most expensive house on the market right now in Frisco is over in the gates of Kingswood, and it is $8.5 million. And I did not look at the specifics on that, but I did look at the picture, and it's enormous. And so that whole part of town, you're going to get into your 6, 7, 8, $10 million houses. I don't think we quite get up into the level of some of your Preston Hollows and all that, but there's chunks of neighborhoods up there that are in the millions. Interestingly, the Frisco ISD, one thing that really differentiates them from other school districts is they've made the decision to be small, and they divide up their high schools very quickly. I believe they have 11 or 12 high schools at this point. They're building them all the time. But compared to something like Allen, who says they only want to have one high school, and they're huge. Frisco has made a commitment to being smaller. I want to say that they don't want to be any bigger than a 4A school. And so you'll see high schools all over the place. There's a lot of, smaller class sizes, I'm guessing. And you get that feel. It's just a different feel of a school district. And I think that's super unique. Ours is Louisville ISD is kind of in the middle between Allen and Frisco. We have, I believe, 4 high schools, and they're, pretty big, and but not insane, and nothing huge. But Hebron's, where our kids go, is very large. I wouldn't want it to be any bigger, but so they kind of are in the middle where they divide up. They're all 6A. From an investment standpoint, it would be very difficult to find a 1% rental up in Frisco unless you just got a killer deal. I'm sure there's people who own rentals there, but you're not going to do it for the 1%, the 1% deal. As far as flipping goes, I'm not sure. Have you flipped anything up in Frisco? Has that been a market that you've tapped into?
I've flipped a couple, and they're
Okay.
over the years. It's just far and in between convenience deals.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking we had a condo years ago. It was kind of a convenience deal. We've had a couple single families that were, kind of the convenience deal as well, built in the 90s.
Yeah.
So the majority of the homes, you don't see a lot of stuff built in the 80s. Um,
Right.
you know,
More downtown, closer to
Frisco was
downtown.
very rural. I mean, when we moved to Plano in 2004, the tollway stopped at 121, and and it stopped at 121 and the tollway.
Yeah.
So like right at the the border of Plano and Frisco,
Yeah.
and 121 was still a basically a county style highway, right?
Hmm.
Like 380. I mean, it wasn't even as big as 380. I think it was 2 lanes on each side, and there was no overpasses. You were stopping 4-way stop signs and stuff,
Hmm.
right?
Which is just insane to think
So
about at this
that wasn't
point.
that long ago. It
Right.
was 20 years
Yeah.
ago, and so
Man.
it's kind of crazy. And they were just building the highway out, and the 121 was being built. That the highway part of 121 was being built, and so you were kind of driving the access road, and I think the tollway was being built, but you were driving the access road. Um, I don't even know when the tollway actually started operating,
Going up there.
going north of 121. I want to say it was probably closer to like 2007 or so before you were driving on it. It might have been in 2008, 2009.
I wonder when
So
Stonebriar Mall came in. I bet that
so
was
Stonebriar Mall was built in the late 90s. And I believe it got built right around 2000, maybe 2001 ish. It was somewhere in that late time frame. It was the late
okay.
90s or early 2000s, because I remember it was kind of a big thing to check out, right? It was the new
Yeah.
mall, and we lived at Irving on the time in the time at the time, so going up there to kind of explore it and
You
check
took
it
a
out
bus
was kind
over to the Hooters next to Stonebriar.
of yeah. Um, so but there were so many just raw areas of land, just
Oh yeah.
expansions and
Well, I
expansions of
met
land.
I told you I've met the lady that her husband developed Stonebriar Country Club, Stonebriar, that whole neighborhood.
Yeah.
And so it's always funny. And I've said this before. I talk to older people that one of their favorite things to do. Everyone thinks that they're some sort of pioneer. And when I moved here, this was basically all fields.
Mm-hmm.
And but there are so many parts of town that is the case. If you've lived here 30 years, there's a decent chance that when you first got here, there were just tons and tons of fields around. And she would tell the
Yeah.
story of going through this cattle gate out into this nowhere field, and his friends thought he was nuts because it was halfway to Oklahoma in their mind. And he went out there and he had this vision for what that neighborhood was going to be. And to know what Stonebriar is now, I mean, you got the Omni Hotel right there, or the Weston Hotel right there. Stonebriar Country Club is beautiful. That whole neighborhood is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy, just had this vision for that. So I always loved hearing her stories, telling kind of about that time. But all of Frisco, Jeff Cheney's the mayor up there. We've talked about, I would love to have him on the podcast because he is a real estate guy. He has the Cheney Group. He's a retail real estate guy. But I mean, he has had a vision for Frisco because now, Frisco has the Star, which is where both of our boys graduated this last year. They hosted the graduations for tons of schools, and that's where the Cowboys practice. And it's turned into this neat little shopping sort of, but restaurant area, kind of hangout area. And
Mm-hmm.
then the headquarters for the Cowboys are right there. But you've got all sorts of just really cool shopping areas all through Frisco, tons of really, really great restaurants. And then now you have the PGA North America has moved there, and they have the Omni. Their development is beautiful. We've both been there for a meal and to hang out a little bit. I've never stayed there, but that property looks really, really cool. And now they're bringing in Universal. The Universal Studios is bringing in a theme park, but it's not quite like your Florida and California ones. It's going to be more geared towards the young ones. And just the descriptions I've seen, probably you're looking at, I'm guessing 12-year-old and younger ish. I don't know. I'm sure once your teenagers get in there, it's going to be a little spare for them. But all the drawings and everything looks like it's really going towards the young families, which is perfect for Frisco. All of that along 380. You've got your PGA, you got Universal, and then of course 380 on the north part is just blowing up. You Panther Creek and all those neighborhoods in there. It's a great, great place to be. The mayor seems to have an amazing vision. They have all sorts of bike paths and parks planned, and so when you kind of look at the kind of shining example of what a city can go from in 30 years, it's I can't imagine you can get a whole lot better than Frisco. I mean, it's just,
Mm-hmm.
they just have done, we didn't even mention the Toyota, the soccer stadium for MLS, FC Dallas, the MLS team, then the Main Street. They've got all that down there. And then you go downtown Frisco, and one of my favorite coffee shops, Summer Moon, is there. It's not a franchise, but they've got several locations. But Summer Moon's a great coffee place downtown Frisco, and so it's fun to go there every once in a while and get a coffee from there, wood-fired coffee, kind of different. So yeah, do you have anything else to add in on Frisco, your pros and cons of it?
No, I think, Frisco's blown up, I mean, a lot over the years. I mean, it used to kind of joke that it was the new Plano, right? It's got a wide array, like you mentioned, from entry level of high twos on up to, upper eights in the millions. It's similar to Plano in that sense. It just hasn't been established as long as Plano, right? A lot of stuff built in Plano was in the 70s when it got its mass production.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things you see about Plano is like a lot of these old shopping centers are being revamped and redone and modernized. And in Frisco, most of that stuff, most of the commercial developments happened, post 2000. So It really wasn't that long ago. I mean, a lot of those, areas off the tollway, the Star and stuff like that was, I mean, none of that was built out. None of that stuff had gone vertical yet. That was all huge fields and stuff.
Yeah.
In 2004, I think there was a few things like that little hospital over there at Legacy and Stonebriar, or maybe it's Lebanon or Warren. Maybe it's Warren and Legacy. There was, some small commercial development stuff over there. And there was a really nice, it still is a really nice subdivision with like 2 acre lots, and it's gated, and it's right behind those dealerships, right there, just north of 121, tucked back in that. I forget the name of that community.
Yeah.
And there's some stuff in there built back in the 80s, the 70s and the 80s that have just these massive lots, and and they were back then, they were $2 million homes back then. So I'm sure now they're probably
way up
10
there
to 20 million.
Yeah.
There's one with like a water park built in the front yard and stuff. It's really cool. If you ever get a chance to drive through there, there's some really like,
I want to say I saw one patient. I saw one patient out there, and I got to go through that gate, and it was a different experience because you're right in the middle of town, and all of a sudden these people have land, and it was cool. I can't remember specifically that house. I just remember being in that neighborhood and thinking, man, this place is great, and huge, yards and all that stuff. So yeah,
but no, I think Frisco's good. They've done a good job with the school district, and they've done a good job with the expansions, and then of course, they've got a lot of driving factors driving revenue into the city, and it's essentially it's the northern part of our metroplex, but it's centrally located, right? It has between between 121 and the tollway kind of cutting right down the middle. And then of course you got 121 and then, expanding on upward towards, 380, and then expanding all the way to McKinney on the east side. And then on the west side, going all the way to Little Elm.
Yep.
I think it's got a lot of, good features about it,
They did a great job. Jeff Cheney, if you're listening, I'm an avid listener, please come onto our podcast. We'd love to talk to you about Frisco and all your plans for it. I think that would be a great conversation. Speaking of great conversations, if you have not, please go back and listen to some of our interviews with other real estate professionals. We have a bunch of them. We mentioned George Roddy was our first one. Great stories. Go find that one. But we've interviewed people from all over the country at this point, and a lot of different perspectives on different ways to invest in real estate and their experience with real estate. A lot of mindset stuff. We've had several people that talk about, just building a good business and mindset. So we've been blessed to have some really, really good guests. So go find some of those. If you have not, please like and subscribe or follow us on Spotify, Apple, any of those. You can check us out on YouTube. And please just find a friend or two, coworker, and share this episode. We are slowly growing. I can tell. I can see it in the numbers. And it's just because every once in a while someone is nice and they share it with a friend. So if you'll do that for us, that would be awesome. And we'd love you forever. Until next time, have a great day.